Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, with patch 1.1.1 coming up in a week and a half, the developers sat down on stream in front of us all to break down the upcoming changes, the ones that are coming in this patch, as well as ones that are coming a bit further down the line, as well as to talk about their thoughts on how Season 1 has gone so far. The stream itself is, as usual, quite lengthy, and if you were indisposed at the time of it being live, or you just didn't feel like watching the whole thing, but still want to know the information, I've got you covered. So let's break down all the big changes and information mentioned during this pre-patch stream. The most important stuff first then, the patch itself has a confirmed release date of Tuesday, August 8th, which is a week from the upcoming Tuesday from right now. We will get the full patch notes for this given to us on Wednesday, August 2nd, nearly a week early. That said, in theory we had the vast majority of the patch notes worth of content shown to us in this stream, and so we already have a decent picture of what's to come. First and foremost, they spent quite a while talking about class changes, all of which are buffs, so let's talk about that. Their general intentions with Sorcerer was to reduce the sort of kiss-curse mechanics, which means that you gain this, but it does this. You gain damage here, but you lose damage here. As obviously that just isn't really fun to play around. It's just too statistical a concept, and it removes some enjoyment. They also want to improve late game survivability for the class, which is obviously a big deal, and there were actually a number of new viable builds that they've created through these changes, really. Here are all the slides that you've been looking at. For anyone here who's really interested in Sorcerer in greater detail, Josh on the channel will be releasing a video later on specifically just pertaining to all these Sorcerer changes, going deeper on how much it matters and how much will really change, but in his exact words, big W for Sorcerer on this day. So many positive changes to abilities and the way that basic mechanics work. A lot of strong changes to legendary aspects that makes them genuinely better, and for real, this is going to make a massive difference for the class moving forwards. Not to mention that we had only one Malignant heart change across the board that was brought up, and it was just one Sorc class specific one. They are changing the Spellbinding heart to give you 10 to 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds after taking elemental damage, which makes that not only actually usable, but actually pretty solid. As for Barbarian, they increased the Fury generation for all of the basic skills by around 20%, mostly in an attempt to make it feel better before you get Fury managing legendaries. They also increased the damage of Double Swing, Enhanced Rupture, Enhanced Charge, and increased the duration on the Vulnerable from Mighty Charge. They made a genuinely smart change to Violent Upheaval. Beforehand it gave you Berserking if it damaged at least 2 enemies, further duration at 4, but now it also just gives Berserking in general if it hits a boss, which makes this actually focusable in single target fights as well. This helps a lot with Upheaval's weak point. They also changed a number of passives for Barbarian, all improvements, the biggest ones being the damage relative to crit damage on Gushing Wounds as a key passive. This will make Bleed Barbarian much stronger relatively speaking, as well as the Overpower boost to the same skill. Unconstrained getting a damage boost is also great. It might make it more usable over Unbridled Rage. I can already picture a Berserking Upheaval build in my head as a result of these things. Walking Arsenal damage boosted duration increased from 6 to 8 seconds as well. Essentially, they've realized that only one Barbarian key passive was in use for the most part, and they've buffed every one of the other 3. Then we have a ton of buffs to Barbarians, legendary aspects too, mostly just numerical increases, but they buffed the Hammer of the Ancients aspect, which is sort of funny to see given its current strength as it currently stands. They buffed the Thorns builds as well, as the other big things are increases to the Leap Quake build concept, increasing the damage and damage reduction gained when standing in earthquakes with their respective legendaries. Past this, they also buffed a number of underused Barbarian uniques. Fields of Crimson is now way better. I can absolutely see people using this now properly, which is fun. Hellhammer had its flat damage increase as well as the burning duration. 100,000 Steps now has bonus evade charges as its innate affix, and movement speed on the boots itself, which makes them much better and more usable. And they put a pretty damn significant buff on Battle Trance as well, which is neat to see. Overall, just like Sorcerer, this is a very big win for Barbarians. Lots of changes, all positives, all buffs, lovely to see. After that, we have Rogue changes. The Invigorating Strike change gives a somewhat secondary option to apply vulnerability consistently for Rogue that isn't puncture. Some changes on things that required multiple casts, or in the case of Rain of Arrows, the knockdown effect that happened on the second wave of arrows now happens on the first wave, which is of course a lot better, but it's still not crazy. It doesn't make this skill be used in situations where it wasn't before. They changed some passives to have notably better numbers as well, mostly lucky hit chance increases. They also boosted a couple of legendary aspects for Rogue just a bit, and then a couple of stat changes on 2 different uniques as well. Nowhere close to as big changes as the first 2 classes, but it's still really nice to see. Still, nothing negative to say about any of them. Then we have my personal main, which is the Druid. They increase spirit gain from every single basic skill by a pretty notable amount, some by around 20%, some closer to 10%, still nice to see, and it means more core skills, which is generally more enjoyable as a way to play. They also gave a significant buff to Wolves here, increasing passive damage by a decent amount, increasing active damage by a very decent amount, and they also increase the bonuses from the enhancements just all over the board for this skill. Wolves should be notably stronger after this patch. patch. On top of this, they buffed Ravens as well, increasing their passive damage an absolutely massive amount, and also buffing significantly the Brutal Ravens enhancement. On top of this, the final skill change is a sizable buff to Rabies, as they both want Rabies to see more use in poison builds, and want poison builds in general to be more powerful. They also buffed the Boulder legendary aspect, which makes me excited. I made a Boulder build before the season that was just sort of sad. It just wasn't strong enough to be even worth sharing with you all, but now it may actually become reasonably strong enough to use, and of course I'll show it to you if it is. They also boosted the aspect of the Alpha a ton, which is obviously the one that affects both wolves and rabies, so they clearly have a build that they want us to use, and yes, I will also be trying this as soon as the patch drops, and I'll be showing it to you too. Also a notable buff to lightning builds here with a spirit boon increase as well. All in all, again, class changes, very solid, lots of good things going on, no nerfs, just buffs, love to see it. Then last among the classes is Necromancer, and this one is sort of funny. There are a number of changes that just won't mean much, and a couple that are insane. Aspect of Empowering Reaper, functioning on non-critical hits, makes shadow damage way more consistent as a build. Aspect of Exposed Flesh, not being locked to only bone builds, is insane for the essence generation of the rest of the necro builds that it has. And then Aspect of Torment is insane now. It's getting the essence regen increase from 20 to 30% up to a whopping 90 to 170%, which is a nearly 500% increase on the top end, and that is just genuine insanity. Necromancers will be having a lot more essence to work with in the near future. We also had some talk about minions in general. They have reduced the way that certain effects damage both Druid companions and Necro minions, the Balrog's Fire Breath, as well as the Fire, Electrified, and Shocklance elite affixes, which is nice. It should help a little bit with these minion survivability and more difficult content, as that is honestly the main issue that they have. As well, they talked a bit about how they are going to put a lot more thought into Druid companions. They underestimated how many people would want to make builds with them, and they want to make them more of a thing, but they also want to keep a reasonable difference of class fantasy between Companion Druid and Minion Necromancer, rather than having them both be really strong, but also feel like they're the exact same thing in a different skin. They also changed one single class-agnostic unique item, which is Temerity. They are replacing the all-stats affix on the item with bonus to maximum life, and also the barrier that it gives you is now based on your maximum life instead of your base life, which genuinely will make it significantly stronger, and it will actually see a lot more use as a result of this. These are all the class and straight up balance changes then, so let's talk about the density changes that are coming in the patch. They showed us a nice graphic of a comparison in what they're doing. This is Nastrava Deepwood as a Nightmare Dungeon right now, and this is what Nastrava Deepwood will look like as a Nightmare Dungeon after the patch that is increasing the density. Notice how the big deal is that there are no longer any big empty hallways, no empty circles anywhere, and in general the amount of enemies has been increased somewhere between 2 to 3 times, which is an extreme increase. It's very nice. They've also said that they are making it a point to do performance improvements as well simultaneously, because obviously otherwise improving density would only make the game run worse for most people. As a whole, I'm quite looking forward to experiencing these changes myself in the game. On top of this, for specifically Nightmare Dungeons, they are making some changes. They are looking into the quote-unquote more annoying affixes, the ones that players dislike, and in the meantime, in this patch, they're going to straight up remove 3 affixes from sigils, ones that players would often just discard sigils if they saw, which are Resource Drain. That's a really big one to get rid of. Cold Enchanted, which is great, as being frozen to death is not fun and it happens way too often. And also Backstabbers, which is nice because that one just felt a bit overtuned really. They also talked about how bosses seem a bit too easy to them, they're dying a lot faster than they intended, and so they are going to make some big changes to boss fights specifically in World Tier 3 and 4. The biggest deal here is that they will be increasing the difficulty of all of these bosses, but also now any boss fight that you do in World Tier 3 and World Tier 4 will also drop 1 legendary guaranteed if you are above level 35. That is actually really big. This alone changes the concept of legendary farming, as knowing that you get a guaranteed one at the end of a dungeon with a boss changes the whole concept of it. As well, while this means that bosses will be harder, it also means that they found a way to compensate us for that change with more rewards, which is exactly the type of changes that they should be doing. If they take something away, if they make something harder, they need to give us something in return. On a similar note, they are making loot goblins have increased loot tables as well, having a guaranteed legendary drop if you kill them above level 15. So that is intended to make you genuinely excited and want to hunt them down if you actually come across one, and of course it's a really good change too. Past this, they reiterated some changes they brought up last week. Respec costs for both skill points and for Paragon points will be down 40%, which is lovely. We will have an extra stash tab, which is, well, you know, it's something, at least for now, and elixirs in your inventory will stack up to 99. Then we had a response to one fun question that people keep asking. Why did they, in patch 1.1, increase the duration of the exit dungeon animation from 3 seconds to 5 seconds? The first response to this immediately was, yeah, we're gonna change this back, which I find sort of funny. They then explained the reason was that they felt 3 seconds was too short, given that you can continue casting if you are hit, as long as it doesn't do 5% of your health as damage, and they were worried about scenarios where players would abuse this to get out of a tough spot, and I think that's just sort of silly. Let's be real, if you're in a spot where you can stand still and cast for 3 seconds, it's not a dangerous scenario, and more than likely it's also a spot where you can do the same thing for 5 seconds. Not to mention they increased the leave dungeon timer, but not the town portal time, which is even easier to access, so it's just sort of weird across the board to me personally that they even made this change, but they've said they're changing it back, so that's that. I suppose we don't need to talk about it. One last thing then, they made a point of mentioning that there are going to be changes to how experience works coming in Season 2. In all likelihood, these will be notable buffs to us to make the game progression feel smoother, faster, and more comfortable, which I really hope is the case. Too bad it has to wait until then though, that is pretty far in the future. To sum everything up then, the patch is coming on August 8th, patch notes on August 2nd. All of this is obviously subject to change, and that's important to be aware of, because there's still a week and a bit before the patch actually comes. A lot of these numbers that they've shown us could be tweaked slightly, but this is the general bones of the patch. This is what they're planning to do. These are the things that they're planning to change. Every single class is getting buffs, with a couple notable standouts of course. Nightmare Dungeons and Helltide density is going up by a pretty fair amount. Respecking will be a little bit easier, and we'll have a bit more stash space as well. I like everything that they said today, really. I don't think it fixes all the problems the game has, not by any means, but it is another step in the right direction for sure. I also want to put out a request that Adam Jackson shows up on all of these streams, at least more often. No offense to the other developers in the streams that they do, but he's just really good at explaining the reasoning of these changes, the actual thought behind it, more so than we are often actually given in these streams. He sounds like he understands the builds that players are playing, why they are doing them, and what changes he could make to both help these players make the builds better, and maybe also make different builds better too. This isn't to say that the other developers are clueless, but, well, he just comes across a lot more like he knows what's going on, you know? Like he actually plays the game for hours and hours and hours every day, even outside of work, you know? I hope you all enjoyed this breakdown of the stream then, and look forward to more news coming out over the next few days as we continue approaching this quite sizable looking patch. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.